All right. Welcome to my lecture here, my presentation. It's about main title sequences and kind of just sharing all the little inside scoop there is while also showing off and showing our cool work. I'm Erin Sarofsky. I own my own studio, Sarofsky. You can follow us on Instagram at Sarofsky_design. And just check out all the other work we do too besides main titles. So here we go, jumping in. Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, just showing off a little here. Civil War, Doctor Strange. Took a long time in my career to get to the level where I could be producing work like this. So I'm excited to share with you the whole range of the process to getting there and all the tips I learned along the way. So I'm just going to start with, kind of the basics and move from there, covering questions that I get all the time to questions that I don't get all the time, but are actually really, really good questions. And weave in some information I think would be important to you guys, especially a European audience. To start though, a title sequence is a legal document. It's a legal document that ultimately became an art form because at a certain point you start to embrace what you have to do. So it started out just as simple text on screen, and then it had music attached to it. Then all of a sudden it became beautiful lettering. Then it started to come on and go off, and even now people integrate it into the narrative. So it's pretty cool. But it is a legal document. There's rules about size. There's rules about length. There's rules about order. There's rules about all the things. All the things. So when we start a main title sequence, we get a legal document that looks like this, and it evolves over the course of all the way to the end because you have all the guilds commenting, and if there's sizing discrepancies, you need sign off. So when we're laying out type and we're doing all the granular work that goes into a title sequence, it's a lot more than just making things look beautiful and flow right. They literally count every frame type is on screen, and that is compared to everybody else's name. So you can see here, can't be less than 75% the size of the average title. The title of the film is always what's known as 100%. Everything else relates to that. So in situations like Guardians of the Galaxy, where we have really, really large type, and the titling is like normal, that would require a waiver from all the actors. So a lot of legal stuff that goes into a title sequence that all the artists need to be absolutely aware of. Okay, so also now we talk about title sequences as this general thing, but there's really quite big differences between television, episodic, and streaming, especially streaming now. So to start with film, these are always longer. These titles are always a lot longer. They can be placed at the beginning of the film or at the end of the film. At the beginning, it's known as a main title sequence. At the end, it's called a main on end. So that's important to know. Sometimes they even are over picture. Some directors are known for doing that. One of them is James Gunn. He writes, at least he has written, for both of the Guardians of the Galaxy, the title sequence into the movie. So when they film these scenes and build them out, they know there's going to be type nestled into them. So for us, we have to work with their edit and get this type into the scene and really just make it work. It's a bit of a puzzle because of the legal requirements. So we usually start there by timing things out, sizing things up right, and just getting a flow for where and how this can work. My favorite title sequence that we've produced, and our first really big one, was Captain America Winter Soldier. All right, cool. I'm gonna take a moment and acknowledge your applause. I'm just like so proud of that title sequence because it marked like a whole new chapter in my evolution as a main title designer, as a studio owner, as a creative director. It really kind of pushed us forward into a whole new realm of design. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to have shared it with you. Okay, so TV shows. TV shows are totally different. They tend to range from 10 seconds to 90 seconds. Obviously, that's a very big difference. They can be placed after a cold open, so that's like the first scene of the movie, or after a recap where they recap what happens in episodes before, or they could go right into a main title. So you really have to ask them and their editor how they foresee everything coming together before you even start designing, because the tone for each of those would be different. Another thing about TV shows is they can and likely will be updated every single season. So if your typography is integrated into the scene or something like that, it will be a hassle for them to have it updated every single year or as cast members change and things like that. TV shows, they tend to stand alone, to be a standalone title sequence, and that's kind of fun. And I don't think you realize this, but the networks actually have a really large say in what happens with a title sequence. They consider it a big branding element for the show. And so they poke their head around a little bit more than they normally would. So it's important when it's kind of a sensitive area because like you want to work with your director or whoever your kind of lead person is, showrunner. And make sure they get what they want. But at a certain point in the process, you have to ask for network sign off. And sometimes they just say like, oh yeah, they're going to do whatever I want. And that just, in our experience, has not been the case. Like we've had fully produced main titles go to network and network say, hey, this isn't what I wanted. Why don't you run this by me? So then we're in a total start over situation. So I want to share Brooklyn Nine-Nine because from a technical standpoint, it's not that incredible of a title sequence, but from a tonal standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint, it's perfect for the show. And so sometimes, well, every time you work on a title sequence, you want to do something that just fits the vibe and feel of a show. And sometimes that's doing a little bit of a lo-fi thing. Here we kind of have a nod to old kind of like cop shows, but with, okay. So, fun sidebar here. We love it when super fans recreate the work. Now, these super fans could be super fans of the show. They rarely love this because it means that we hit the exact right tone. Like you got a great show, it's fun, people love it, and then it inspires people to go to this next level. And what I find to be hilarious about this one is that someone even made a tutorial about it. And I'm gonna just show the intro to the tutorial because I think this guy is hilarious and in his gamer chair and the whole deal. Every time I watch this, I get a good giggle. But I just think it's incredible that our cheeky little main title, it's about 20 seconds long, that we did for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, has multiple tutorials online about how to create it.
Hey, what's up guys? Naughty and Sans here for another exciting episode of Learn How to Edit Stuff. I got a question on Instagram about how to make a Brooklyn Nine-Nine style intro. I've actually wanted to do this video for a while, and since somebody asked, I figured now is the time. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine, funny show, good intro. You ask, you receive. That's how it works here at Learn How to Edit Stuff. Boom! If you're not familiar with the intro, this is what it looks like. Stylized, cool colors, text comes in, freeze frame kind of action, and this is what we're going to be making today. It looks... I can't tell the difference. My God. After Effects, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be doing it in After Effects.
After Effects, ladies and gentlemen. I love it. Yes, and that is exactly how we made it in After Effects. But I have to say, for every single show, every super fan out there has literally made one for every single show out there. You have Avengers, you have Guardians, you have Community, you have Harry Potter, you have Legos, you like Stranger, oh God, it's like, it's amazing. It's amazing. So just absolutely hilarious. And I picked my favorite 9 of, I think, I think we pulled 30 links. It was, yeah, at some point we just stopped keeping track, but it's really an amazing, funny thing when your work can become part of the lexicon like that. Anyway, streaming. Streaming is another area, of course, pretty new. Not that new, but pretty new. And we have to just humbly respect the skip intro button here. I have skipped intros. I've skipped other people's intros. I've skipped my own intros. I feel like we have to acknowledge that that exists, and we have to figure out how we're going to work with that. Um, that has brought on the title card only approach, um, where you just have like the name of the show and created by, or sometimes not even created by. Streaming is a little bit different with their legal requirements. Um, what's been happening is that they tend to like an idea of a longer title for the first episode and then title cards for the rest of the season, or short little mini titles. Um, but the reality is that this is territory that is still being experimented with. And I mean, I was just watching Queen's Gambit, and at the end of the season, they essentially had a giant main on end. And I was like so riveted by the show and so drawn in. Like, I really loved having that at the end of the show, and I never really thought about presenting that as an idea to somebody. But I also like mentioned that to a few of my friends. Hey, I know you watch a series. What do you think of the main title? And they didn't see it because they just shut it off. So, it's really kind of an interesting thing, giving people the control to really to skip it or blow by it. I am a big fan of the the title card up front, or the big main title at the beginning to set the tone of the show, and then doing a title card or something smaller for every additional episode, because you know I like that feeling, being brought in, but I don't want to be annoyed by having something get in my way every single time I'm binging, just eating popcorn and watching episode after episode. And you have to know that they're watching the analytics, how many people are skipping, what's going on, and they're taking that into consideration when they decide whether or not to do a main title in the future. So, yeah, if we keep skipping, they're going to keep wanting to not make main titles. So don't skip every single one. Here's an example of one we did for a show called Friends from College. It did really well on Netflix for its first 2 seasons, but for some reason they canceled it. I think it was probably because it was too expensive to produce. It had like this amazing cast, but this was an interesting one because the cast is pretty prolific. The series was already shot, so there was no way we were going to get the cast members together, but it felt very character centric. So we came up with this idea or way to show how these friends, their relationships had evolved over time. And here's that main title. And we did it with doubles.
Darling, don't you go and cut your hair. Do you think it's gonna make him change? I'm just a boy with a new haircut, and that's a pretty nice haircut.
Awesome. So, and then for all the additional episodes, we did shorter little cut downs that used some of the scenes that related to each episode. And these are actually from season 2. Enough of it. Let's go into the common questions, because that's really about format and where they go, and that it's a legal document, and that's kind of the boring stuff. I think I want to cover the stuff that I am asked all the time, my most common questions, and that's, who do we usually work with? Okay, directors, writers, showrunners, executive producers, network executives, and studio executives. That's who we deal with, the people absolutely essential and responsible for the show. Do we get to meet the actors? No, not really. But this is my list. And yes, a shirtless Chris Hemsworth is really one of them. But if you really want to meet the actors, it helps when you incorporate them into the concept of your piece, like Shameless. And I'm going to play that one for you because that's one of my earlier title sequences as my own studio. And it really is just a very simple idea, but it does incorporate the cast. So, of course, I got to direct them and meet them and build this amazing set. So here we go for that. All right. So where does our inspiration come from? You know, people talk a lot about this and I know we're all inspired from the world and relationships, but for me the show is the inspiration. And that's why every single one of my title sequences looks different. You can go from Captain America to Brooklyn Nine-Nine to Community to Shameless. They are a true representation and a manifestation of the characters in the show, in the set of the show, in some aspect of the show. And that's really, if you're going to be a main title designer, I would encourage you just to lean into that. I know some people have like intense stylistic, what's the word I'm looking for? Intense stylistic, looks or patinas that they have on all of their title sequences. And that's great. And typically if a show wants that, they're going to call that person or studio to do that thing. But what I love about what we do is that we really use the show to inform the thing we're going to make. Okay, do we get to see the movie or show before we pitch? Yes. Yes, of course we do. We always do. That is, unless the show hasn't started filming. Then we get a script, we get supplemental materials, we'll get outlines, we'll get whatever the director or, key person thinks we need to understand the tone. Sometimes it's costuming, sometimes it's production design, sometimes it's matte paintings. You just absolutely never know where they're going to be at in their process. Luna, I'm in the middle of something here. Go, go, go. Either go or stay. You decide. Okay. Okay, she's gonna go. Okay. Work from home, right? Okay, so how long do we get to come up with our ideas? Usually about a week, sometimes 2, depends on schedule. Usually a week is a good enough time to digest and get some ideas on paper. It's nice to have 2, because then you could also do like a really beautiful presentation. Now, once you win a main title, how long do you get to produce it? But it depends on the complexity, but plus or minus 4 weeks. So for a nice 30 to 60 second main title, that's a decent schedule. But of course, for these quick title cards, we can crown them out in a week or 2 if needed. I think the key with that is just making sure that we're not missing some big thing when it comes to the branding of the show, the logo, having just enough time to develop that. But if we're focused, we can crank it out pretty quick. Do we pick the music? We get this question all the time. We do not pick the music. No. shows have music producers, composers, and like everybody on a show has an opinion about that. The only thing more subjective than design is music. So unfortunately, we rarely get a say. Sometimes they ask our opinion, but a lot of times it's pretty much a mandate. Okay, when in the process do we get a track? Typically towards the end. Typically towards the end, we get a track, or we get some music or some original composition. There are exceptions, and the one exception that comes to mind is for Animal Kingdom. And that was Atticus Ross composed a track for that before we even pitched. So John Wells went to Atticus and they did this thing that was really intense and beautiful. And they came to us and they were like, do something that embodies this with all of the themes that we're dealing with in the show. And that show was really kind of intense. It had Ellen Barkin as a matriarch. She had all of these sons. There was this weird like Oedipal thing going on. Plus they were, robbing people and, up to no good, a lot of drugs, a lot of sex, all the things. So it was like, oh my God, look, how do we do something that encapsulates all that? And this one took a lot of work. We were working directly with all those themes and developing it. And eventually we had all of these things kind of worked out, and it really needed like a theme to take it all, to kind of link it all together and to create these moments of calm and chaos. And that's when we integrated the tattooing scene. So I'm really excited to share this one with you as well. So what I think is interesting about that is if you look at that show and you look at Shameless, they're both produced by John Wells. And those are two completely distinctly different main titles for different kinds of families. They're still both shows about families, but and that crazy family dynamic. But again, the manifestation looks completely different and tonally is totally different. Okay, another question. How many people work on a main title? Really not that many. I guess that's why not many people make main titles. Teams are usually about 6 people, actually less. But that doesn't include live action production. That's like a whole other thing when you shoot and build all that stuff in. So the VFX intensive titles, like the work for Marvel, requires a lot more, 15 to 20 people. How many ideas do we pitch? Typically 1 to 5. We used to pitch a lot more, but I have decided to really focus on, if I were them, what I would want to do and come in with a more distinct point of view for each. So I think that that's really, really an important aspect of how we've evolved as a studio. To go in with only one solution is a pretty bold move, but sometimes it's the right thing to do, I always get this question, can you show me one of your pitches? No. I'm just kidding. I'll show you one we just did for the Good Lord Bird. I wonder if you actually believe me. Of course I'm going to show you a pitch. So this actually just came out. We did not win it, but I really absolutely love the work we did, and I'm gonna just kind of blow through it. This is always start with a nice title page and end with like a nice little thank you note, and this is the work. This is the first treatment into the second treatment. Big, bold, cool type. Very cool. Here's another one. Love that frame. Couple pages there. And then this one's really stunning as well. Look at how beautiful that would have been from a visual effects standpoint. And then all the threads. That one's out now, or just came out. Of course, a thank you page. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat. How do I become a main title designer? We get this question all of the time. The answer is simple. Try to get a job at a studio that makes main titles. How do I get a job at a studio that makes main titles? You develop a solid portfolio that includes examples of both main title work and commercial work. While there are studios that do just main titles and just entertainment work, they're pretty rare and they're usually very small teams. So while they'll hire outside people for concept development, they usually keep production in-house. So there's not a ton of opportunity there if you want to be like a full complete main title designer and not just a concept developer. The way you do that is you look at their general reel for insights. And I'm going to share with you our reel so that you get a good understanding of the cross-section of work that we do. Cool. I hope that was a little bit tasty for you. Okay, so what's the best advice I can give somebody starting out? 100% cultivate relationships. Go to conferences like this, meet people, get yourself out there. My first entertainment job as my own studio was for Community. And that directly led to Captain America and subsequently all the Marvel work. So, and the reason Community happened is because somebody remembered me from working with me at DK. I don't even actually know who that person is, but they were looking for main title solutions and they called in a bunch of people and I was just a name on a list of people that did main titles. So it's all about developing relationships, and it's amazing and crazy that my relationship with the Russo brothers started on Community and developed into Marvel main titles, but that's how it goes. You just never know what relationship is going to take you to whatever your end game is, you know? And I know you're thinking, seriously, who do I know that will be a connection like that? And I just wanted to share, like, we just did some book covers for Star Wars for Thrawn, and it was a friend from college that gave us that job. Literally, somebody I knew growing up at Rochester Institute of Technology was like, oh yeah, Erin does cool stuff. Like, maybe she'd be down to do some book covers. He works at Penguin. He's a great guy, Scott. So you just really never know. Your friends from college are going to be your network, your complete network growing up through the ranks of your career. So relationships, relationships. Okay, so now I broke out also the really smart questions. Really smart question. And that's, what is the briefing process like? We ask a lot of questions. We ask about themes, plots, characters. We ask about tone. We ask if they have any ideas for music. But we also have to ask about what the mandates are, like if they already have an existing logo, what the length might be. Remember, I talked about is it going after a cold open or a recap? If the network or streamer is on board with them doing a main title. Uh, and really kind of dig in and ask a lot of questions. The more you ask, the more you're going to be prepared with. Um, Doing your brief and coming up with ideas. Um, Even riffing with them at the time and being like, well, what if we did something like this? Or what if we did something like that? We'll get like a real sense of yeses and nos, all of that other stuff. So I also think it's really important to ask if it's a competitive pitch and who you're pitching against, because who you're pitching against will likely give you some context for what they're looking for. Who are the decision makers? This is really important. You're going to talk to a lot of people working on these shows. You got your post producers and your editors and your directors and your writers and your showrunners um, and your network people. Sometimes it's really obvious who the decision maker is. It's really hard to say on the phone, like, yeah, but of all you people, who's the one that's going to decide, right? Like, you can't really just come out with it. So really pay attention to who people are deferring to on the calls. They say, I don't know, John, what do you think? I don't know, like a lot of times people have a lot of say that you might not expect. Editors are one of them. When a director or showrunner has a really close relationship with the editor, they'll have them on the phone for these calls. Well, you got to pay attention to that. Listen to what they're saying then. So this is one of those ones that it's not always clear. So don't assume because somebody's an executive producer or a director that they are the ultimate decider. It could be somebody that you did not expect. Competitive pitch versus single bid. What's the difference? Well, there's a big difference, especially if you own a studio, because you're going to invest a lot of money in trying to win these shows. So, it's always a challenging situation. You have to, if you're in a very competitive pitch, you have to come in with a clear, distinct winning solution. Um, and even if it's not competitive, you still want to do that. But if it's single bid, you can kind of create a process that allows you to kind of through each round evolve it further and know that each round is going to get you to the solution. But when you're coming out of the gate and it's competitive, you have to really have a lot to show for yourself and do really beautiful work, and also maybe do a motion test or show examples of what you anticipate it feeling like or being like in the end, that's beyond just maybe a frame or two or a written treatment or something like that. How much work goes unused? I say about 90%, but it's probably more. When you add it up, most boards are not chosen, right? Like, even that pitch I shared with you, Good Lord Bird, I know that there were 3 companies that pitched. Each company did at least 5 treatments. So that's 15 treatments. One of them was chosen, right? Of that one that's chosen, I'm sure a lot of that work went to the wayside too. You develop scenes and visuals and all of this stuff that just keeps getting tossed away until you ultimately decide on, your final, 8 vignettes or whatever they are. You have to develop a really thick skin and know that all of the work goes towards something, greater. And quite frankly, just a lot of really beautiful work goes unused and gets put in the vault. Okay, who owns the work and why does that matter to you? This is a really big one, both as an artist and as a studio owner. Because as a studio owner, we don't even own the work. The client or studio owns the work. So you have to be very aware that if you're working on these projects, that you are bound by the requirements that the studios, the legal documents that they create that say whether you can show process work, that if you can't show process work, that means all your original treatments, you can't publish them or show them ever anywhere. And that's really important for you to understand, because as individual artists or as freelance artists, you are bound by the rules that the studio is bound by. So if a studio is not allowed to show process work, and as an artist you put it up on your website, a board that you produce for that studio for a job, that studio is going to get in trouble, and consequently you will get in trouble too. So before you take on any work, if it's really important to you that you be able to publish that work on a website or anywhere, that you get the studio approval, and that the studio gets the studio you're working for gets the studio that owns the work approval for that. It's really unfortunate when we get a call from somebody and then have to call the artist and say, hey, that wasn't allowed to be placed out there, you got to take it down. There's always hard feelings either way. So we're just, as a studio, we're very clear with our artists beforehand, before they even get to work on a project, that might be the case. But as an artist, you have to be aware that might be a factor in whether you do or don't take work. Considering that 90% of the work goes unused, there's a high likelihood that your work will go unused. And if there are requirements that you can't show the work, that might mean you don't want to take the work. So, go into it with eyes open. Okay, what are the technology requirements for big studio films? Well, to put it simply, security, making sure your infrastructure is secure, and being a part of a real VFX pipeline. For television shows, it's really not a big deal. But, for films, it is a really big deal. Some are in linear, everything has a LUT. You really have to be able to work within that LUT and to be able to finish properly. So it doesn't really matter when you're developing boards or concepts, but as soon as you move into production, that it is essential that you understand the VFX pipeline and what you are and are not allowed to do with your files. Okay, what goes into sourcing imagery and typefaces? This is a really big deal. If you cannot shoot your own stuff, that means you have to license it. So you can't just pull stuff off a web, even if it's news footage, it's being used for a television show. All of that needs to be licensed properly. And I've heard so many stories of main title companies just going and grabbing stuff and like trying to just put it in their show, in their title sequences. And then the shows get in really big trouble for that, as do the companies that do that. Typefaces are also tricky. There is a lot of fine print in the licensing agreement, and it's a lot of times very unclear if something is allowed to be used in a film or not. And the same typeface on different places where you could buy and download them will have different agreements. So it's really important that you read those agreements and make sure they're documented and have lawyers look over this stuff, because if you get caught in a little tangle there, thank God we've never done that, but if you get caught in a little tangle there, like, it's going to cost you and the studio a ton of money. And you just don't ever want to be that person that's like not paying attention. So if you are working at a studio and there is a typeface that you found that you want to use, just run it by the producer that's hired you. Say, hey, like, I found this great typeface, I really want to use it. Is this agreement okay with you guys? Like, studios will love you for that. You're really thinking ahead there. Because once a client falls in love with something, like, they gotta have it. So you gotta know what the ramifications of presenting that are. Okay, so that's enough of that. I just want to talk a little bit about designing in the time of COVID. Because people are leaning less on live action production, which means they're leaning more on typography, stock, CG, all of that stuff we can create in the computer without going all the different places and running around the world and shooting. So that's really cool for studios like mine that are resourceful. Also, though, everybody is working from home. So we all learn to work remotely. We work remotely, but in the studio. So everybody's computers at home are controlling their workstations in the studio, which from a security perspective is a little bit easier. We're also not shuttling files around to each other, and we have our render farm. So that makes it really cool. But that means studios like mine are not limited to hiring local talent. And so now is the time for anybody anywhere in the world to send their reels. Anybody in the world, anywhere to send their reels. One of my guys was working from Portugal for most of the time. We've had another guy in Austria working. Like, we can hire anybody anywhere now because our infrastructure can support that, which is great for my European audience here. And that's the case for most studios like mine now as well. So if you really want to get into main titles and you really want to be working with a studio like ours, you got to send us your work now. Okay, so that's it. I don't know how I did for time. I should have probably been tracking that, but I would love for you to follow us on Instagram, Sarofsky Design. We're, getting going there. We haven't been like super hip with the social media, but we have kind of gotten up to snuff, and we're showing a lot of cool stuff, including some boards from the grave. So things that we are allowed to show that are so old that people won't care about it. And just show some making of content and stuff that you really might want to see or check out. If you post a cool note, we'll send you some swag in real life. We're doing like enamel pins and stuff like that. But yeah, for sure, send us your reel. It's really, really important that you put yourself out there. Now's the time. Okay. Thank you so much. I have absolutely appreciated sharing my hour with you, and I know we're about to do some questions. Feel free to ask them now or email me later. I'm here. Thanks, guys. Bye. Now I can quit this software.